You're listening to On the Margins with me, Dan O'Sullivan.
And me, Eamon Stack-Mulvihill.
In this podcast, we will examine sites of education which are off the beaten track, non-traditional, non-typical, but diverse and exceptional, looking at learners who are often marginalised and ignored. So we're delighted to be joined here in our UL studio by Helen Lowe. Helen is an educational researcher, and she also works as a university teacher within the School of Education in the University of Limerick. Helen, could you tell us a little bit about your background and your academic journey?
Yeah, so background, I suppose I'm a teacher. I would have been a business and accounting teacher for nearly 2 decades. In school. Then always had kind of an interest in inclusive and special ed. During my school time I was a Senko for 12 years, and I suppose I came from a marginalised area myself, so I would have grown up in Ballinacurra Weston. Yeah, not I suppose the easiest place to grow up in the world. And so always kind of had a grow for education. I suppose the emancipatory approach that education can lead to. Mm-hmm. And I always kind of fell in love with what education could bring to my life. And that started that grow for me, and kind of fell into teaching by accident. Went on, kind of did a degree in business, didn't know where I was going with it. And then kind of by chance, a friend of mine was doing a dip in UL. She loved it, and I said, look, I'll give it a go. And I absolutely fell in love with the teaching world. My first placement was in CBS in Limerick. And as soon as I stepped into the room, I knew I'd found a little calling in life.
So there's a couple of things there I have to ask you a little bit more about. So,
yep.
Senko, Special Educational Needs Coordinator.
Yes.
So you did that for 12 years. Was that in CBS?
No, I actually taught in St. Munchin's College.
St. Munchin's, okay.
I started in Munchin's in 2005.
Okay, and then being from Weston and teaching in St. Munchin's, we have to talk about rugby. Does that make you a cookie?
It would be, yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm more a hurling gaff person, but if I was rugby, yeah, my family would have been cookies.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You're one of our own, so. Yeah. And then in the hurling?
Yeah.
Who are we talking about in the hurling?
Liberties.
Excellent stuff. And where did you go to college first?
So I started in Waterford.
Okay.
And then UL.
And what brought you down to Waterford? Was there a blah?
No. No, I'm with my husband 28 years.
Yeah.
So no, I met Cronin in school. No, again, pure chance then like that, because I suppose I grew up in a place like none of my family would have done Leaving Cert or anything. So my education was very much by chance. And again, it was pure down to the buddies. A couple of my friends, I got UL but didn't want to get out. And a few of the girls were going to Waterford, and I kind of jumped on the bandwagon.
So hold on now, back up here again.
Yeah.
So you got enough points to do business studies in the University of Limerick.
Yeah.
And you turned it down to go to Waterford.
To get out of Limerick.
Was that to get away from your mammy, or to get away from the crowd, or what was it?
Yeah, I suppose the madness of what was. I just wanted to change.
Are we talking the 90s here? Not
yep.
to ask you your age, no, because that would be... But,
you are talking the 90s, yeah.
And so...
That was 97.
1997, yeah.
Eamon probably wasn't even born at that stage.
No.
I was starting in Ards Colreach at that stage, yeah. What secondary school did you go to?
Skull Carmel.
Skull Carmel, yeah. It's very, very good school, because my wife went there, and I have to say that. But so you went from Skull Carmel, and did they teach home economics in Skull Carmel?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I must talk to the wife again about...
I was like, where's this random? Is this misogyny or no?
A small bit, yeah. I get a belt now when I go home. Yeah. And then was there a big cultural shift for you, or was that transition people make from first year in college, all the freedom of being away from mammy for the first time down in Waterford, or just getting the hell out of Limerick City for a little while?
I suppose a bit of both. It was absolute crack and madness. Like, I don't know how I got through an undergrad ever. But yeah, it was an eye-opener. And I suppose for me it was an important shift in my life as well, because it was important to see kind of outside of my own community and what that looked like.
And then the business degree, was that just because you didn't know what you wanted to do, or you thought you wanted to make money, or...
I don't think ever money was a question. It was never a motivation for me. Look, I can't say I had an amazing experience in Skullcarma with business. I didn't. But I kind of liked a lot of the elements of the course. I did languages as well, so I did French. So that kind of was a bit of a draw for me. That drew me to that.
So you did the business degree in Waterford, and then did you get a second offer for the University of Limerick?
No, I went for the postgrad. I did my degree and then I applied. So back then, the DIP, it was the postgraduate diploma. So you'd apply for it, and back then it was Tom Kelly's gig. I don't know, you might have met Tom Kelly. Tom was here prior to Ger.
Oh yes. Okay,
so
very
back
good. Yeah.
then,
So I took over from Ger. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So back then, to do the DIP.
That's the point I'm getting at. So Limerick was good enough here for the DIP.
Perfect. I was ready to come home. I was good.
Yeah.
And I kind of had worked a bit. I came back home. I worked in insurance and did the office job, and I was just allergic. Then we had Ben, my eldest boy, and then decided, okay, where am I going? What do I want to do? And then I kind of, as I said, a couple of friends started going into teaching. They loved the DIP here, and I just said I'd give it a go.
Yeah, and that is very often the case. And when I'm interviewing people for the PME, the PME is what you have to do once you have a business degree if you want to become a teacher. Now, it used to be a DIP, but now it's a 2-year course. When I'm interviewing people for the PME, they say they mightn't use the word allergic, but pretty close to it. They can't stick in office anymore, or they had. There's an awful lot of us are failed accountants, I think. So that's a fairly typical story. And so you was it only 1 year then?
It was 1 year then, but we to go in and do summer courses. Okay. So the 50 of us were accepted onto the summer course after interviews. Then we to do touch typing and shorthand. This is now 2004. For UL to hold the DIP, the business DIP, they had to have a unique selling point. So we to go in and do a 5-6 week course in presentation on shorthand and touch typing. And
when you say presentation?
School.
The presentation school?
Yeah,
so
CCL, college there.
Is that now the LCFE? Or was it Griffith College?
CCL.
Did that become
Central
Griffith?
College.
Or is it still there?
I think it's still Central. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's still on that campus.
Yeah.
I think it's still Central College. It's one of the PLC providers anyway within the city, very important one.
Yeah.
So we had to do that. Then 50 of us had to sit an exam.
Yeah.
And then 25 were accepted to the DIP.
So you had a 50% attrition rate. Oh, this was just to get into the DIP, was it?
To get into the DIP.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So then of the 50 of us that set the exam here, only 25 of us were accepted then for the DIP.
Oh, that's fairly brutal.
But back then, remember, there was it was the opposite. It was the exact opposite of what's happening here. You had a massive supply with very limited demand. So when we went out into the workforce, it was very tough to get it done. Very tough. And I kind of fell into Munchins by accident. Yeah, and never left the place.
So you had to do teaching practice first?
Yes.
Once you got it past the hyping test and all the rest of it in CCL. And you did your TP in CBS.
First one CBS, yeah.
And I suppose a lot of the students in CBS would have been from your own locality.
I would have known a lot of them, yeah.
And then
parents.
Then you kind of escaped your own locality, went across. You crossed the Shannon.
Well, I had to go to Croom then for my second one.
Okay.
So I ended up with 2 DESH settings, in urban and rural.
Yeah.
And that was kind of always my draw anyway.
Yeah.
The DESH.
The DESH, yeah. So then. Yeah, and then when I started at Munchins had just turned from boarding to Aldi, and it became very tough. So when I went into Munchins, it was a very tough setting. It had a lot of the feuding families, things like that. A lot of kids like that would have been struggling with, I suppose, social issues, disadvantage, and I think that's where I found my niche.
And is that what brought you inside the gates of the hallowed halls of Mary Immaculate College?
Yeah, so the SEN side when I ended up, so I followed then. I like that the SEN department wasn't really set up in Munchins, so it had just started. One of the girls had started the kind of ball rolling on it, and then I ended up taking it over. Then I decided to go back and do the postgrad in SEN within Mary I.
Very good. Who was running or was that a new course then, or had it been going a while?
No, it'd been on a while. So Patsy Daly would have been kind of over the main area of that. So that's when I went in 2010.
And would that have been your second year of postgrad?
That was a second postgrad.
The second postgrad,
yeah.
And was that a year again?
Year again.
And did you do a master's then, or jump straight to PhD?
No, I did a master's. So when I was on the postgrad, I got pregnant on my daughter. So I finished it, and I said, okay, I'll give it a break. Yeah. So I didn't go back then till 2017 and did my master's.
And was the master's? I'm going to say Seni. In the School of Education, we've had a bit of back and forth about SEN, so special educational needs, I think everyone calls it. Yeah. And then some people put in an I for inclusion, or some people put in a D for diversity or disability. But yeah, whatever you're having yourself, like. Yeah. So did you do your master's in SEN?
I did masters in education, but I looked at an element of so what I did my masters in was how primary schools link to secondary schools in regards to the management of data of children. Okay. So it wasn't the actual transition of the child itself, it was looking at, so say the biggest issue for me was as a SENCO was dealing with the volume of data that comes in from primary schools, how to get it in on time. The education passport had just started to become a new thing from the NCCA, but it wasn't being handled very well, and the structure of it was very loose. Okay, so
we're going to have to back up there and talk about the education passport and transitions and that type of thing. I do remember, because I spent a lot of time working in Youth Reach, and we had a lady there, I suppose we'll call her the SENCO, even though that wasn't officially her role, but it was kind of it was what she was landed with, so it's kind of often happens. But she was often bemoaning the fact that people or students would come in and they would have gone through all the steps to get I'm going to use the word diagnosis of a special educational need, or and then when maybe they had some time off from school, they were out of school for a little while before they came to us, and then all that information seemed to be lost. And then at the same time, all the GDPR stuff was coming in, so we were ringing up schools saying, have you some sort of, can you tell us, or and it was a bit of a barrier there. So I'm back to you then now on this educational passport, because I don't know what it is, but I think it may be something along those lines.
So yeah, that's the level of frustration you described there, that what happens is between the comings and goings, a lot of information can be lost between primary and secondary. So the NCCA decided to try tighten this up a bit. So every single child has to have an education passport moving from 6th class to first year, regardless of SEN needs or not. It's a beautiful document. It interviews the parents, it asks for information from the child, what I like about school, what I dislike, and if it has potential to be really powerful, but again, there's not enough systems around the use of it. Deadlines and stuff get lost. Schools pass it over maybe too late, too early. So it was a point of frustration for me, and that's what kind of led me to the research.
Is that still an issue today, or is it something that has...
No, because again, I worked with the SEN team in Mary I, and I kind of did a little bit of checking in to see how things have changed. So the biggest kind of point of frustration that I see with the system is the kids have to go through their STEM testing. They do their standardised testing in 2nd, 4th and 6th. So in 6th class, they have a fairly comprehensive, they do the micros and the sigmas, and you get a standardised score of the child. That should be passing over very quickly to first year. But what ends up happening is, because it's happening at not the right time, those kids are put through the same amount of standardised testing by the secondary schools before they come in again. So there's a lot of high stake testing put on the child unnecessarily, that if we could tighten up the system, that there should be one standardised test that's done in 6th class that's automatically fed into the first year feeder school. But it doesn't happen. So that's where my research kind of stemmed from.
And was this research for your masters?
Yeah.
That's not the EN. I'm always giving out about acronyms. That's not the ENIP program. That's later, is it?
No, EdNip is later.
That's
Yeah.
later, okay.
Yeah.
So you completed your Masters.
I did.
That was your third postgrad.
Yeah.
So you're a severe masochist.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so are we saying 4 years of postgraduate study at this point? Completed?
3.
3. So the Masters
two
took...
two postgrads and a Masters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 3, yeah, okay, we're not too bad. And then someone who you cursed likely for years sold you a PhD, or the idea or the notion of doing one. And
Kind of sold myself into that one, yeah.
did you? Okay, yeah. So, well,
I loved the Masters and I missed it.
okay,
I had a couple of years off my...
you're so positive.
I had a couple of years off again, so 2018 I finished the Masters and I went back in 2020 then.
To do the PhD?
Yeah.
And did you do that, did you do that part-time or full-time or?
Part-time, I worked full-time while doing the PhD.
In St. Munchins at the time?
I was Munchins. I never make life simple for myself.
No, it sounds not.
Coming from a complicated background, you remain complicated.
Yeah.
No, so I went on job share with Munchins, but then I took an SEN post in TUS outside in LIT. Okay. So I balanced between both of them while I started the PhD, and then I was offered a full scholarship in Mary I.
Yes.
So I stayed with the Munchins on a job share and then taught in Mary I for a while, and then eventually ended up on full-time hours at Mary I while I was finishing out the PhD.
So you were working full time with 2 kids, and you decided you'd have a PhD, and you were kind of changing jobs around around that time as well. So did you do anything sensible then, like decide to build a house in the middle of that, or just to complicate your life a little bit further?
No, that was all done.
Yeah. Okay. So then the PhD. So we understand we understand the motivation now behind the postgraduate work, or for the dips anyway. And then the Masters, we can see where you're coming from, and the need for the research. What was the prompt for the PhD, or can you tell us about the PhD research?
Yeah. Now, this was kind of an idea I had originally for the Masters, and I diverted away from it. But anyway, look, I was glad I did because I enjoyed the Masters work. So I always had a curiosity, I suppose, when we look at, say, even my avenue where I grew up. And the majority of the lads I grew up with ended up in feuds, gangs, crime, drug dealing, all of the above. So it would always was a curiosity as to why maybe a pocket of us, a tiny amount of us, decided to gravitate towards education or skill training or that kind of notion of let's escape what's predestined for us. Yeah. And I suppose when you grow up in somewhere like I grew up, there is a very much predetermined path for you. And a lot of people will sell you that predetermined path and your expectations tend to be low. And I went through school and college meeting people that were very biased and discriminatory, and I definitely met a lot of bigotry. And expectations were always sold very low to me, and it bothered me and it pissed me off. So I just went, right, there has to be something that's common amongst us that's driving slight shifts and changes. Because I witnessed lads that I grew up in very similar houses with, and I saw the change for them. And I just always had, like, why did we go very different? You know, that if we look, sound the same and come from very similar houses. And again, as I said, I was the first in my family to do a leaving cert. You know, so it was all these small things are kind of...
How many of you are there?
There was 4 of us. 2 of my brothers have passed away.
Okay, so
in between all the postgraduate work, so there's more complication.
Yeah. And where are you in the family ranking?
Youngest.
You're the baby. Okay.
I was the baby by far.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of the biggest motivation. I was like, and I suppose the other thing that always bothered me was our estates get such bad press.
Yep.
And such, like, if we're being sold anything, it's always a negative thing. So I was like, there is so many gorgeous positive stories here of resilience, and whether it's a typical success road or not, most families I know can tell a gorgeous story. And I suppose that's what drew me to a PhD, because it had that kind of flexibility of where I could storytell. And that's where I went towards ethnography, that I could tell somebody's story. And I was really kind of sick of the othering as well. I'll tell you an interesting story, and this was always, you know, you think of like sliding doors moments where you're like, where did this lead me to? And I suppose when you do a PhD, you have a lot of reflection. But I remember I was in Munchins too long, and we'd a lot of, as I said, there was a lot of feuding elements there. And we had a lot of kids going through serious like issues and problems that we wanted to help. And I remember the vice principal, and they did it in the best intention in the world. They said, look, there's been a bit of research done in the estates, and they kind of think they've a way of how we should deal with these kids. So we've invited them in, they're going to talk to us. I presume that these people were born and bred in these estates and knew the kids inside out. And they were going to tell us, because we know these families, this is the best way to handle, Now again, I would have been on my back as well, because I was going, okay, they're going into my estate as well, and they're going to tell me how to handle them.
Did they bring down fellas who were eating big dinners above in Dublin to tell you what's what?
No, they came from Cork.
They came from Cork? Jesus,
so
that's
this
nearly
girl
worse.
stood up, right? Now, again, in the noughties in our estates, they were fairly tough, and that's been well documented, and I don't need to go into that again.
Oh, yeah.
But this very middle class, privileged girl from Cork stood up and told us how she did this 6-week living in anthropological study. Literally, she might as well have been back in 1930s in a little Sudanese village, of how she watched from the outside in.
The Great White Hope.
This, like Darren McGarvey says, this poverty safari, she literally did it. And she told us, how to handle these kids. And she gave us this line of, you need tough love with them. And I'll never forget the anger that built up inside me, going, I know that most of us, grow up with nothing but tough love. So that's what they need, more tough love, and they need to be nailed to the cross. So I remember saying, if I ever do a study, it'll be from the inside.
And then IGNIP. Am I jumping ahead too far?
You're jumping, right.
I'm going too far.
When I moved in, so that was my motivation anyway, the PhD, that I wanted the storytelling, I wanted to be from an inside perspective, I wanted real life, and I wanted real people that experience positive and growth and resilience, and that needs to be celebrated more. Then with Mary I ended up working then on an EdNet project as part of when I was working through Mary I. So that was a lovely project as well.
And what is EdNIP?
So that is Embracing Diversity and Nurturing Inclusion project. So that works with the 5 Desh Band 1 primary schools in Limerick City.
Okay, so they are Our Lady Lourdes, Christ the King.
No, so the 5 main ones within the city, you will have Our Lady of Lourdes, St. Michael's Junior School.
Where's St. Michael's?
In the CBS campus.
Yep.
So that would be a separate entity.
Yep.
Then you've CBS boys on the same campus, the primary school, because they have 2 separate schools.
Yes.
Then we have Presentation Girls, and you have...
Is that in the same campus again?
Next door, there's a wall between them. All that big Sexton Street campus.
Yeah.
And then St. John's Girls. So
St. John's. So there's 2 boys' schools in Presentation Court. Or Sexton Street, sorry.
Sexton Street. No, the juniors is actually mixed. Okay. So they're mixed up to 2nd class.
And then they split,
Exactly.
Yeah. There's probably some weird Catholic reason for that, or have you...
I don't know, because when I was in school...
That was just the way they did it.
It was, it probably is that gender divide.
Yeah.
The hormones kick in, they want them separated. Yeah, probably.
Okay, so you started... Was EdNIP something that was already in existence?
Oh yeah, that's well in existence. That's a TED project in Mary I, so that's an inclusion project that they work on.
So you were jumping onto that?
I became a project worker on that then. I was really attracted to the work they did.
Okay, so you weren't reinventing the wheel, you had kind of a framework to...
Oh no, I was only a little small part of that. Yeah, that was...
And when you were looking at EdNIP then, had they any mistakes that this lady from Cork, who was probably very well intentioned but maybe got it wrong, had they any of the mistakes that she had, and why not?
EdNIP is a very much grassroots project. So what happened, why EdNIP came about, was the 5 principals who are, and now I wouldn't have known some of the original principals, but the ones that are there now, lads, they're the most incredible human beings you'll ever meet. And their intentions and their expectations of those kids are incredible. And they have been amazing to work with. But it is very much a grassroots project. So what happened was, when kind of migration levels became really high and immigrant families became big in the city, because Desh schools had lower numbers, they ended up taking the volume of migrant families.
Yeah.
So what happened then within the city was that the principals were struggling to integrate these families correctly and in a very ethical and humane way. They wanted them to become part of the communities. So the intention and heart was always very true. And what they wanted was to set up a support network that would allow Irish families and migrant families become a genuine community. So their project is incredible, and it created a really, really lovely space. And the project, like, I just had the most amazing experiences working with Afghan women and migrant families, Ukrainians, and just doing these gorgeous projects with them that really tries to create genuine friendships between Irish and migrant families.
Yeah, so there's, I know Jade Gill, is it McGill or Gill, but she's one of Jen McMahon's PhD students, and she is doing some work in that regard in those schools as well. But with Narrative 4, had you did you?
We use Narrative 4 a lot.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So the idea of storytelling.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, we should definitely look at it even for us, because their own students, because it's for empathy. It's narrative. We did loads of Narrative 4 projects.
Excellent. Tell us more about how great Narrative 4 is, because I'm a convert. We're hoping to get some people from Narrative 4 on the project. But can you maybe tell us some of your experience? Did you use it as a way of integrating some of the immigrant families with...
We used it with the kids rather than the parents.
Yeah.
So it was a child-based. We tend to use it up the school a bit, so maybe 4th, 5th, 6th class. And we used it as an empathy kind of creation system. So
there'll be people listening who don't know what it is.
Yeah. So in a nutshell,
yeah.
Narrative 4 is about the retelling of somebody else's story. So we went and all got trained in Narrative 4, and like what you're trying to get the kids to do is listen on a very genuine level and try walk in somebody else's shoes. So if you're doing Narrative 4 training, you'd go into maybe like kind of restorative circles. You'd pair up, you'd each tell somebody a significant story that meant something in your life, and the other person then has to retell it from your perspective. Very emotional, very incredibly powerful, but for children it really kind of helps them with listening skills. And as human beings, it's probably our weakest point of communication is listening. So empathy is very empathy driven. It teaches them about like very Brené Brown kind of stuff on empathy. Very restorative but incredibly moving.
So I've done a good few story exchanges, and you do feel great after them, and there's kind of an energy in you afterwards that's it feels great, and we had Joe Power, was it last week with Joe or the week before? And Joe's the week before, yeah. So Joe's very into restorative practice, and we were talking about how people can think it's soft or wishy-washy. But actually it's these things that are actually harder to do.
Yeah, soft skills, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a long-term greater benefit than, and there's a cost to ignoring these type of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it certainly does help you understand someone else's perspective, and it reduces that type of othering.
And I think as well, like, kids are surrounded by a lot of mis and disinformation.
Yeah.
And they're going into school with kind of, I suppose, notions and, assumptions and misconceptions on other children. So I think Narrative 4 kind of, it's a very calm way. It's not, pushing anything. It's allowing the child discover each other in a very organic, natural, safe zone, and I think that's why it works. Yeah,
and the simplicity of it. Yeah. It's a very simple concept. Okay, so we've touched on Narrative 4, and then I stopped you talking and kind of didn't give it.
That's okay.
Were there other things maybe like Narrative 4 that were useful to you that maybe we don't know about yet, or was there anything else as part of that project that jumped out at you, or do you know anything even about that project, about the origins of it and why it was successful? Yeah,
as I said, it was a grassroots. It was the principals that approached Mary I in dire need, and I think that's why it was so successful, because it's from their perspective. Mary I are very much like there to help them drive it, rather than them driving the actual project themselves. So it's very much from
Inside.
staff, principal, families. What do we need? And it's going from strength to strength as a project, definitely.
Okay.
But yeah, very lovely.
And so what did you research as part of that, and what did you find?
With EdNib.
Yeah, and
That wouldn't have been part of my PhD research.
Okay.
Now. That would have been more job.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I'm going to ask you about your PhD now, but I think you're glossing over the pain, the isolation, and the blood, sweat, and tears of the PhD a bit too much.
Yeah.
Maybe that's because it's done with now and you're over it. But let's even before we get into that, have you any words of encouragement for someone who's in the library right now, looking out at the sunshine, and
I suppose, like, for me, I found genuinely the first few years of the PhD so enjoyable.
Good.
I did, because I think it was such a project of love and it was so personal to me. And when I got out on the ground with the participants, it was nearly cathartic. Like, we cried together, we chatted, and like that, it was a very soulful journey. And the last year was extremely difficult, and we can't ignore that that coming together of the PhD work is extremely difficult. But like, what I would say to anyone doing it is create strong timelines, create good, solid goals to work towards, break those goals up and make them as manageable as possible. Set a target for yourself. Be your own expectation. Make it high and aim for it. And like the last sprint of the marathon is the toughest one. But I think if you kind of go, right, I have a deadline here and I deserve to make it.
Would you recommend having the 3 jobs while doing the PhD?
Come here.
and the 2 kids. And what age were the kids when all this?
My kids are older, so I know. Well, Carly is nearly 14 and Ben is 22.
But that's now.
Yeah, so go back. Sure, I'm just finished, so go back 5 years.
Oh, okay.
So Ben would have been he might have been just first year here, was he? Or maybe he was leaving cert.
What's he
Oh
studying
no,
here?
it was actually torture because
Yes,
of
there you
COVID.
Tell us more about
And
the torture.
The torture start of parenthood and PhD life
Yes.
was COVID had started.
Yeah.
I was teaching full time.
Yeah.
Sorry, for the first few months I was teaching full time in Munchins online.
Yeah.
During
gosh,
COVID.
Yeah, that was.
Ben was upstairs studying for Leaving Cert, and Carly was downstairs with Moonto Ray and RTE, doing cartwheels against a wall while I was trying to scream at her while trying to teach and try check on a child upstairs doing Leaving Cert. And Cronin got no break from COVID, so he was out working full time.
Cronin is the husband.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
So that was all during, first year PhD. Sorry, I kind of blocked that from my memory.
Yeah, you know, that's the thing about pain. You kind of black out.
Like childbirth.
I think you just had a trauma response there.
Sorry, COVID was. So our first couple of years of the PhD was online.
Yes.
Yeah, so I never met. There was only 4 of us in our cohort.
Yes.
And we didn't get to meet until year 3.
Did you get out in the 4 years or 5 years or?
I did 4.5. So I started 2020.
You did very well.
I targeted better, but anyway, life happens. I won't get into that.
Was that structured?
Structured. So the first 2 years were structured, and then after that, you're out at sea.
Yeah.
You're on your own.
Yeah, I did it when they started the structured PhD in Mary I, and it was 7 years, and the last 2. I think anyone in the final year of their PhD should just be allowed a cuckoo pass.
Yeah.
If you go absolutely nuts, you get a free pass.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
No, you do. Your mind alters slightly to reality.
You're creating a great picture for me.
But it's only short term, and the 2 of us are getting back to normal eventually.
I'll be here to mind you anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've now put everyone in the country off doing a PhD.
Not at all. It's amazing. It's very transformative. Learn loads.
You did a thematic analysis, and you used those 2 ladies, Ron and Clark, who make thematic analysis easy, at least on the surface.
Yes.
You used an analysis of Twitter conversations, am I right?
Part of it, yeah, part of the ethnography. I did digital ethnography.
Okay, so, that's very clever actually, because then everything is there.
Exactly.
And did you just grab things from Twitter? What way did you go about the ethics of this?
So my biggest thing was, because I was an insider researcher, every time I knew when I was meeting progression, when I was going for ethics, that the biggest thing was bias and subjectivity.
Yeah.
So that became a huge kind of focal point for me that I had to overcome. So I was coming in obviously with a very strong lived experience of social class mobility from inner city Limerick. That's my life. So I had to get out of my own head. And I needed to find a broader perspective on social class in Ireland. So kind of organically, I was like, where do I find this? But I needed to be up to date. I needed to be relevant. I need emotions. I need stuff that is real to life. And reading articles and published work wasn't giving it to me. So I just started kind of doing a bit of search. And like that, it was very organic. And it was supposed to be a very short part of my research journey. And it turned into a full year. And I just found all these conversations happening on, at the time, Twitter, which is now X. They were emotive, they were real, they were Irish, and there were people describing things that was happening in their lives because they were growing up in certain areas, and all of that horrible baggage that comes with being poor.
And was this, so you used Twitter or X or whatever we're having ourselves at the moment. Did you use other social media sources?
No.
Or
So I started originally, but then I wasn't finding it because, you know yourself, a lot of the other social media sources are not text-based. They're mostly pictures. So that was the kind of genuine approach that Twitter suited for me, because it was text and conversation. It was asynchronous, and I could see people's emotions. I suppose I hit the jackpot, lads, with it because COVID had stirred up so much about inequality.
Yes.
And around educational inequality, kids at home with nothing but a mobile phone and maybe no proper broadband or using credit, versus a child at home with the parents that could have a full office of suite of ICT that gave them the right infrastructure to access school. That drew a lot of social class conversations.
Yes.
And that allowed me to really drill down and see what was happening in the country.
And the big back garden that I had for COVID is certainly... there's definitely a space there in terms of mental health. But then in terms of the themes then, symbolic violence?
Yes. Bourdieu.
What?
Bourdieu.
Bourdieu. Don't ever hit anyone.
Symbolic.
Can you explain symbolic violence?
So symbolic violence are kind of elements of capital that comes out, that you end up like that. Symbolic violence is I can't access my education properly because I don't have the right infrastructure, and then I'm judged on that. Symbolic violence is the day-to-day small prejudices that we meet all the time. Again, going back to how people speak to us, how people speak about us.
Western girls don't go to college.
Exactly.
Okay.
Symbolic violence, my accent, my dress sense, what paper I read, I'm judged on that. And that kind of, I suppose, formulates in our lives in a very negative way. It's nothing to, it's all those hidden nuances of bigotry.
Would you have noticed a lot of these in, do we call it the Mount or Skull Carmel, or does it make a difference?
The Mount, fine, I'm good with colloquialism.
Is there, I don't even know.
The Mount.
Yeah. Would you have picked up on that? Or would most of the girls who go to the Mount be from more or less the same area? So,
no, we had a mix when I first in. Now, eventually that became much more kind of Desh bound. But like a good example of symbolic violence was when I tell this story in my PhD, when I went into first year. At the end of first year back then, you had to do your assessments.
Is this to be streamed?
Exactly, into second year. So up to 2015, that was a very real thing. So to be streamed then, you were A, B, C, D, and E. They kept it simple. You were up in the A's, B's, C's, D's, and E's. And my results came out, and I wasn't amazing. I had B's, C's, and I had 1A. But I remember as a 12-year-old, that meant a lot. And then my class assignment came in, and I was in the E class. And I was really upset. And I was like to my mum, no, I'm not accepting this. But again, my mother wouldn't have had that cultural capital or the I suppose the absolute bravery to pick up the phone. She was like, oh no, Ellen, you're going to ring him now if there's a problem. Like, I don't know what to be saying to him. So I said, no, ma'am, I'm not accepting it. And again, it was a sliding door moment, I think, for me, that I picked up the phone and I asked to talk to my year head before I went into second year. And I said, ye told us that if we got certain grades, we would be put into certain classes. And I said, that didn't happen. Now, obviously, my language probably wasn't as eloquent or structured, but in my own little words.
So let's destructure that now for a minute. Can we put on
what
the
are you talking about?
What was the yearhead's name?
So I just
Let me tell you a question now.
But I think in the simplicity of my child's language of why didn't I get this, I may have struck a chord. But I suppose the most infuriating thing, their response was, well, look, Helen, all the girls from your area are in that class, so we think you'd be more comfortable there.
With your friends. Yeah, I had the opposite problem. I was the only boy in Castletroy in the C class in Art School Reach, but
so I was put in because of my address. And not because of my merits. So I argued it and I got moved.
You got moved?
Yeah.
And did you get moved to the A class?
No, I was put in with, like, as French was C to E, so I was put into the C class.
Okay.
A and B were German, and that's where I deserved to be. And then, but like, my lifelong friends were in that class. A lot of the girls that pushed me through a system that maybe I wouldn't have pushed through because I didn't know. Like, I lived in school year to year. I always went back seeing if I'd stay another year, and that was kind of how we lived. I never knew if I wanted to get to Leaving Cert. I didn't know if I wanted a junior cert. But I truly believe, like, and again, a lot of my research would show that like friendships and your social capital, who you surround yourself with, and again, there's nothing, I'm not groundbreaking data here, but your friendships are vitally important, and like that's what I think. Particularly during your teenage years, as you're kind of breaking away and finding independence from your parents. And parents aren't that know all force anymore. But I think, like, for that, and I think we've lost a lot of that in schools, lads. We need to start looking at the impact of friendships again. We're segregating children too much in schools. Yeah.
Just going back to this phone call you made to the yearhead.
Yeah.
You approached your mother first. And Mammy didn't want to make the call.
I don't think she didn't want to. Then.
Yeah, she didn't want to create a problem.
Because Mum would stand up for me in the morning. She'd go in and kick a door in if she had to, if I was being bullied or anything. But she wouldn't have had the knowledge or that cultural capital to have the conversation. And she felt like typically most parents from these areas that haven't been through a school system, it's a very intimidating space. So she just didn't have that
confidence to talk
and
to
know-how. And she just said, Helen, look, I'll try help you, but I think maybe you're better off phoning them yourself. Because she didn't even understand a streaming system. So she didn't know how to put that into words then. And that in itself then is part of the cultural capital that you were carrying in your virtual school bag into the door of the Mount. The deficit of capital. Yes, excellent. So I could wax lyrical with you now for a long time about Bordeauxian theory. And interestingly, when I went to Mary I was going around and instead of saying Michel Foucault, I was saying fuck alt. Like we all did at the start, and Bordeaux. And Bordeaux instead of Bordeaux. But you had the benefit of French, I did German. I still got in Bordeaux for a while. I'm still doing it now. But we've kind of touched a little bit on your story. And we've spoken a little bit about your research, and it seems that the research is very much motivated in your own personal story. Does that carry through then into your teaching? Definitely, yeah. And I think always that even in school, I'd always make sure the lads knew where I was from and where my background is and what my motivation is on teaching. And like, I think kids need to see to be. And I think, definitely, I'd say if you asked anyone in any of my modules, they'd know. And same in Mary I was teaching, they know exactly where I'm from. Because I think it's really important to know that. On that, something that I think it was maybe 2 months ago or so, we were talking about it at a research event. One of the other people at the event actually raised the notion of one good adult. And you raised the point that that's no longer accepted in the same way. Do you mind explaining a small bit on that? So what I found in the research, and one good adult can be very oversimplified. And it kind of, what worries me about one good adult is it can kind of push kids to a simple plan which doesn't exist in real life. So my research kind of showed that the one good adult theory fell short very quickly, because we work with, and we see this in a lot of the research, children form their lives and their capitals and their habitus through community, school and home.
Yep.
And that's it. That's where we are. That's who makes us who we are. But what I found in the research, for all the people that found success in very, very difficult circumstances, there was nearly a buffering system between one of the three social structures. So what I mean by that is, maybe when home fell apart, they had somebody in a school or a community that stepped in for them. Now, if you've only one good adult operating somewhere,
It's not enough.
when that falls apart. So I kind of worry that, like, I understand the premise of one good adult, but I feel it's oversimplifying, and it can kind of make people turn their back when maybe they see, oh sure, they've one good adult there, what's the problem? And it can make you kind of, and again it puts, and one of the biggest issues in our society, especially Irish society, is poverty is a blame. It's your fault you're poor. Why are you on the dole? Get off the dole. Go out and get a job. And these oversimplification of a very structurally, systematically wrong, approach to life, that nobody looks at the bigger picture. And the one good adult thing, unfortunately, feeds into the, sure, you've one good adult, what's your problem?
Yeah.
So, to summarise your view on that, it's not that the one good adult idea is bad or of no worth. It's that it's an oversimplification. It's a good start.
Exactly.
But,
can I say?
Yeah, go ahead.
What I think is, it's dangerous in isolation.
Yeah.
That it needs more to look at the really complicated structural elements, and I think we need to look at how do we create better buffers between systems.
Yeah.
Like if you look at any of Epstein's work around the child at the centre, how do we create more of that Venn diagram of connection between home, school and community, that if one falls apart, they're connected enough that maybe somebody else can pick it up.
So, are we talking about community partnerships?
Yeah, a lot of the time.
Yeah.
They're huge. Yeah, huge.
And so then, we're kind of getting to the end here. You'd be delighted to know.
You're right.
You seem very relaxed. Sometimes people are there. The questions you ask me are way too hard. In terms of the community partnerships, then, I'd be fairly familiar with Ballinacurra, but particularly the rugby club, Young Munsters Till I Die. I don't think the West End was open then.
No. Well, we would have had the building was there. That would have been the scout hall for us. So we would have had
Who was the scoutmaster?
I don't think that it wasn't officially scout.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And they call it something else for girls anyway.
But for us, it was always a scout hall.
Brownies. That's what.
But maybe that was the origins back in the 60s.
Yeah.
Whatever. Weston was first built in the 30s, but it was always a scout hall. But I never ever remember a brownie or a scout ever being in there.
Yeah.
And look, that could be my poor memory, but for us, that was our centre.
And what were you doing? What were you doing in the centre?
Youth. There was a youth centre there, so you go in and you'd have different youth projects, but very limited. But in my research, kind of surprisingly, what threw up about community partnerships for kind of the people that I interviewed was clergy, and the important role that clergy played for 80% of the participants.
Even the young people.
But say, for my research, because of the theoretical framework I used for social class mobility, everyone had to be over the age of 30.
Okay.
So it was I had the ages of 30 to 60.
Yeah.
And including myself, lads, the positive experience of clergy stepping in and helping us in education. So for a lot of them, it was down to nuns and priests stepping in, knocking on the door saying, come here, there's a grant here for you, or and the informal, I suppose, and I think it's important to maybe say that, look, the Catholic Church obviously doesn't come with the best history, but there was good people there, and sometimes that's forgotten. But I have to say that some of the nuns that worked in Our Lady of Lourdes, the principal there for years, she was angelic.
Yeah.
And she was very much driven. Now, there was two others there that I won't talk about, but in Our Lady of Lourdes, and like that, it was priests that stepped in sometimes for me in education and kept me going.
And I can't remember the lady's name, but I was volunteering for her there in the Red Tech. I She was a nun as well, but her name escapes me now.
Sister Helen, no?
It might have been, yeah. Oh my God, it's 20 years. But yeah, and listen, that's probably why you got on so well in Mary I as well. You realised that you weren't going in there like I was with a bee in my bonnet about the Catholic Church, and I don't like this and I don't like that, and they're going to change it for me. But
yeah, it was that clergy partnership with the communities that actually was one of the surprising throw-ups that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
And you weren't throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as they kind of.
Yeah.
They probably say that a bit too much these days. But
but the community partnerships definitely are very important, and some of the lads in my participants wouldn't have got anywhere without community partnerships and the push they had in their education lives.
And you would say the Catholic Church were key in developing those in Weston when you were growing up?
Yeah, for the participants, definitely. Like
myself and Eamon were there for, we were in the West End, which is the Scout Hall. We were there for the Limerick Traveller Network Traveller Pride Day, and can you remember the priest's name?
I do not, but he spoke in it for...
Yeah, you know, again, he was there front and centre of managing these community partnerships, which is excellent. Helen, kind of getting to the end, so is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm just like that with the research. You know, there's a lot more to do with it. I think when you're looking at social class mobility, like mobility has become stagnant for nearly all hierarchy of classes, but I think we need to look at more social class elements of schools, definitely. I think we need to look at further integration in regards socioeconomic backgrounds of children being isolated and siloed into schools on their own. I think if we go back to the friendship element, are we losing a lot of that by continuously siloing according to addresses?
Yes.
That's kind of my bone of contention.
And that's what we're going to change.
Yeah.
Helen, thanks very much for coming in here and not only sharing your journey and your research, but also your own story, and you've been very generous in doing so, and we thank you for it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to this episode of On the Margins.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow and subscribe on all your usual platforms or wherever you get your podcasts.
You can also check us out on our website, aidonthemargins.com, for more info, content and upcoming events. See you soon.